Hey, I'm Luke Ford. I want to talk to you about a terrific 2016 book that I read. It's called Crooked: Outwitting the Back Pain Industry and Getting on the Road to Recovery. It's by Catherine Jacobson Ramin, and just gets sterling reviews, 169 sterling reviews on Amazon.com. Book came out in 2016, and it's definitely worth a read if you're interested in back pain, if you're interested in back pain industry, and all the people getting by pulling scams on innocent folks and not helping them get any decent recovery from their pain. So this is about a chapter in along my town's main boulevard, counted 23 signs for chiropractic offices and nearly as many for physical therapy practices. Seemed as if everyone I knew was seeing a chiropractor, a PT, or both. More than 35 million Americans visit chiropractors each year at a cost of roughly $7 billion. About 9 million see physical therapists at a cost of $13.5 billion. Much of that treatment is for back pain, but what are patients actually getting for their money? Both physical therapy and chiropractic are described as manual therapy, but the philosophies and techniques that underlie them are different. Chiropractors vary in how they practice. Some don't ever perform spinal adjustments and have adopted other approaches, but traditional chiropractors apply a high-velocity, low-amplitude thrust to a specific intervertebral joint, thereby manipulating that joint beyond its normal range of motion. By manipulating the joints of the spine and relieving what they call vertebral subluxations, traditional chiropractors say they can cure many types of physical dysfunction. Rather than practicing manipulation, physical therapists, or physiotherapists as they are referred to in Europe and Australia, practice mobilization, exerting gentle pressure on a joint to expand the existing range of motion. The Cochrane Collaboration is a reliable international network of physicians and scientists established to review and summarize the medical literature with the least bias possible. Although chiropractors often tell patients that long-term treatment is essential, there is zero evidence that ongoing chiropractic care of back pain or any other symptom or disorder is effective. Zero. The Cochrane Collaboration makes it clear that the only evidence for chiropractic in the treatment of back pain is in cases where the pain is of a very recent onset. Such cases, 1 or 2 sessions of chiropractic manipulation may be helpful, and the problem often resolves by itself. But if 2 sessions don't do the trick, there's no reason to believe any benefit from further visits, nor is there any evidence that maintenance treatments are effective. That news surprises you. You are not alone. People typically pay a year after year of treatment, certain that this is the way to stave off future problems. In the early 1990s, the mother of one of my young son's friends sent me to my first chiropractor after taking x-rays, conducting a physical exam, having me hold small glass vials, which would allow him to test my muscle strength and assess organ dysfunction. He reported that beyond the vertebral subluxations he'd already detected, I suffered from weak adrenal glands and poor kidney and liver function. The good news was that with the year's worth of twice-a-week adjustments, which my healthcare plan would pay for, I'd be fine. As a mother of an infant and a 4-year-old on call 24/7 for heavy lifting at awkward angles, I signed on, agreeing to have my back and neck cracked on Tuesdays and Fridays. I figured it couldn't hurt. Immediately after each treatment, I experienced a modicum of relief. By the time I got home, the pain was as bad as ever. I never thought to ask questions about those subluxations, but if I had, I would have learned that they are unidentifiable on x-rays, in hands-on examination, or by any other methods. The premise that the spinal joints can slip freely into and out of position is false. Such dislocations do occur, but only in the event of serious trauma, the kind that takes you to hospital's emergency department rather than a chiropractor's office. One study showed that even when they are presented with identical copies of a patient's x-rays, a group of experienced chiropractors could not muster consensus about where in the spine the subluxations occurred or what the proper course of treatment should be. Like most people, I assumed the chiropractic treatment was safe, but most of the troubles that send patients to a chiropractor in the first place are included on the World Health Organization's list of contraindications to chiropractic adjustment: disc herniation, severe or painful disc pathology, leg pain, dislocation of a vertebra, the presence of a spinal hardware from fusion surgery, hypermobile joints, vertebral instability, inflammatory arthritis, osteoporosis, or a history of long-term glucocorticoid treatment, which can make bones fragile, especially in older people. When chiropractors treat pain that is caused by undetected malignancies, the outcome can be catastrophic. Two women who were interviewed for this book visited a chiropractor for many sessions to treat what they assumed was ordinary neck and back pain, and they finally had CT scans at the behest of their MDs. Both had spinal tumors as well as advanced lung, liver, and brain cancer. Neither one survived. In Trick or Treatment, a must-read book about fallacies in alternative medicine, science reporter Simon Singh and his co-author scientist Edvard Ernst described an experiment conducted by psychiatrist Stephen Barrett, one of the most fervent naysayers regarding chiropractic. See what they might advise. Barrett arranged for a 29-year-old woman to make 4 visits to different chiropractors. The first chiropractor diagnosed atlas subluxation and predicted paralysis in 15 years. The problem was not treated. Second practitioner found not just one, but many vertebrae out of alignment and one hip higher than the other. Third said the woman's neck was tight. Fourth said misaligned vertebrae indicated the presence of stomach problems. Despite the disparity in diagnosis, all 4 recommended long-term regular adjustments. Yeah, of course they do. These high-velocity, low-amplitude thrusts would elicit the chiropractor's trademark popping or cracking noise referred to as a cavitation. Chiropractic patients have been brainwashed into believing that cavitation conveys some benefit, but, says retired chiropractor Samuel Hamola, the author of Inside Chiropractic, A Patient's Guide, all that the popping or cracking noise means is that a bubble of oxygen has been released from this lubricating synovial fluid in the spine's butterfly-shaped facet joints, reducing pressure on tiny infiltrating nerve endings. Within a few hours of cativation, as synovial fluid pressure is restored, facet joints return to their original position, and the pain comes back until the joint pops up again. Some patients develop what is called chiropractic neurosis, the compulsion to have the joint pop many times a day or an hour, and they start to self-adjust, twisting sharply in an effort to summon that sound. Too frequent adjustments may lead to joint irritation and over-manipulation syndrome, which spinal ligaments meant to be taut as guitar strings become weak and overstretched, developing microscopic tears. Overstretching the ligaments is a special risk for women of childbearing age, whose robust estrogen levels make their pelvic ligaments especially relaxed. In a chronic chiropractic patient's later years, overstretched ligaments may contribute to spinal instability. Pain, numbness, or even the loss of motor control of the feet can be the result. Surgeons often use a diagnosis of spinal instability as a reason to order spinal fusion surgery. Studies showed that at any age, roughly half of all chiropractic patients experience temporary adverse side effects after treatment, including pain, numbness, stiffness, dizziness, and headaches. But they are minor in comparison with the more serious threat, possibility that a cervical neck adjustment may result in a chiropractic stroke. Here's how it happens. The vertebral arteries, which run roughly parallel to the cervical spine, make a sharp turn around the uppermost cervical vertebra just before those arteries travel into the brain. The top cervical vertebra, they form a harmless kink till a chiropractor performs a tug and twist adjustment that violently rotates the neck. That movement can tear the delicate walls of one or more arteries, producing a blood clot or swelling that cuts off the blood supply to the brain. The resulting stroke may lead to permanent brain damage or death. Chiropractors downplay the risk of such a stroke as insignificant, but on Google, found too many reports of people who'd gone in for a simple adjustment and been damaged for life. The statistic that's usually cited is that there are 1.46 strokes for every million necks cracked. But some papers describe chiropractic stroke prevalence at between 3 strokes per million and 60 strokes per million. Given that 1 million chiropractic adjustments are made in the US each day, it's possible that someone has a chiropractic stroke every 24 minutes. You do this with your elbows all the time, shadow boxing all day with a desk job, and a much better solution. Get the activator. There are much better solutions than chiropractic. Activator is cool. Because chiropractic strokes don't usually happen immediately, they may occur several days after an adjustment. Both physicians and patients may fail to make the connection. meaning that the majority of these symptoms are never reported. Symptoms immediately prior to the stroke include headache, neck pain, and visual impairment, therefore may be mistaken for drunkenness, drug overdose, or the flu. A person who feels dizzy or nauseated after a neck adjustment should be alert to the possibility that the artery has been damaged. Recent years, the American Heart Association and the National Stroke Association have both recommended that before a chiropractor adjusts the patient's neck, he should inform the patient of the statistical association between cervical artery dissection and manipulation therapy. Self-proclaimed healer born in 1845 near Toronto, Daniel David Palmer was the father of chiropractic. He began as a revival tent mesmerist and entertainer who could make people fall asleep, dance wildly, or tumble into convulsions. Later, he described a vitalistic force or innate intelligence that existed in the spine, could organize, maintain, and heal the body. But vertebral subluxations could derail that energy with dire physiological consequences. Yeah, just get yourself some Jupiter male vitality. Shalom Aleichem, Tom. Okay, good to see everyone in the chat. In 1924, when most states began to license chiropractors, Baltimore Sun journalist H.L. Mencken, famous for his attacks on any aspect of life that struck him as absurd, unleashed a vitriolic critique. A hardy blacksmith or ice wagon driver might be turned into a chiropractor in 6 months, often by correspondence, he observed, advising that the backward swarm with chiropractors, and in most states, they have been able to exert enough pressure on the rural politicians to get themselves licensed. Mencken advocated for scientific inquiry, recommending that chiropractic be studied under rigid test conditions. In 1963, after many years of seeking to contain chiropractic's expansion, the American Medical Association established the Committee on Quackery. In a meeting of the Michigan State Medical Society, chairman and physician Joseph Saboteur observed that rabid dogs and chiropractors fit into about the same category. The AMA asked physicians to lobby to end federal recognition of chiropractic education and to recommend that healthcare plans and Medicare stop their reimbursement for chiropractic care. 5 years later, the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare announced that chiropractic professionals would need to adhere to the standards of modern medicine and stop discussing subluxations if they were to be able to continue practice. The government's antipathy should have checked chiropractic's popularity. But in the early 1970s, under intense pressure from chiropractic lobbying organizations, Congress ordered Medicare to pay for spinal manipulation. To be reimbursed by Medicare, the chiropractor needed to show that a subluxation existed on an X-ray. That should have imposed an impossible hurdle, because as we've established, subluxations are not visible on X-rays, or for that matter, in any form of imaging. Undeterred by that detail, chiropractors installed X-ray machines in their clinics, adopted the now standard practice of taking a complete series of spinal images, doing so repeatedly over the course of treatment, thus exposing the patients to unnecessary radiation. Financially, this was a boon, allowing chiropractors to collect payments for both X-rays and treatment. In the 9 years that followed, Medicare payments to chiropractors jumped nearly 20% annually, and the number of chiropractors grew, tripling between 1970 and 1990. In 1976, an anonymous source within the American Medical Association leaked material that revealed details of the extent of the AMA's campaign against chiropractors. In response, Chicago chiropractor Chester Wilk filed an antitrust lawsuit against the AMA. 11-year court battle ensued, concluding only when a U.S. District Court judge found the AMA and its co-defendants guilty of violating the Sherman Antitrust Act. So the AMA had to notify all 275,000 of its members that no further disparagement of the chiropractic profession would be permissible. And as a result of that ruling, chiropractors were to have the same standing as physicians. In the state of California, chiropractors teamed up with anesthesiologists that they could perform a procedure called manipulation under anesthesia on sedated patients. It was a pot of gold. Part of occupational medicine, workers' compensation insurers reimbursed chiropractors up to $20,000 for 3 successive days of such treatment. In 1990, the British Medical Journal described spinal manipulation therapy as 7% more effective than standard hospital physical therapy, without acknowledging that physical therapy was notoriously ineffective as a treatment for lower back pain patients. Saying that chiropractic was 7% better than an ineffective protocol was faint praise indeed. Instead of claiming an increase of 7%, the General Chiropractic Council in Britain employed the figure 70%. That number showed up on many chiropractors' websites. When the mistake was discovered, the council chalked it up to a typo. On the basis of that oversight, the United Kingdom's National Institute for Health opted to support the British National Health Service plan to endorse chiropractic as an approved therapy for lower back pain. The United States, in light of increasing concern that chiropractors were taking patients for a ride on the government's dime, Medicare altered its confusing stance, instead ordering chiropractors to restrict their medical billings to active therapy rather than maintenance services. Quickly, chiropractors altered the way they described their treatments so that they could code every session as active therapy. 2001, Medicare paid chiropractors some $285 million for improperly billed services. In 2014, Medicare spent $500 million on chiropractic care. There's no shortage of chiropractors and people who want to be treated by them, even though there's no proven benefit to what they do. Chiropractors do pretty much what they want. It's amazing. You got to check out this book, Crooked, Outwitting the Back Pain Industry. In the early 1900s, B.J. Palmer, Daniel David Palmer's son, took over his father's chiropractic training business. Hunting for a way to actually identify subluxation, he invented a device that made him a rich man. The neurokilometer was priced at $1,500. According to Palmer's doctrine, every chiropractor needed one. Later, the e-meter became indispensable. And later, chiropractors embraced a more expensive device, the disc compression table. Supposedly, this process separates or distracts the vertebra. Sadly, there's no scientific evidence that this treatment is more effective than a brief dangle from a pull-up bar. In 1995, chiropractors had 1,000 spinal decompression machines in their clinic. When they did a study, only one trial showed that patients who were treated on the machine showed an improvement in pain. So in 2007, Medicare stopped paying for the procedure, and then chiropractors started advertising to get people to pay out of pocket. Not every lower back pain patient sees a chiropractor, but a prescription for physical therapy is practically a given. And most physical therapy is useless when it comes to treating back pain. The only decent physical therapists are those who do not take insurance, do not work on a lean basis. And in the presence of a herniated disc, chiropractic treatment is contraindicated, meaning it should not take place. And in the acute phase, the first 2 weeks after the injury, the McKenzie method of mechanical diagnosis and therapy is much more recommended. So Robert McKenzie was a physiotherapist. He died in 2013. He developed this technique by accident because he was occupied with another patient at the moment. He sent his next appointment, a patient who suffered from a disc herniation and associated back and leg pain, into a room to wait. Told him to lie on his stomach on the examination table in preparation for the standard ultrasound and heat therapy. which does no good. But Mackenzie did not know that his colleague, who had used that room last, had left one end of the table elevated like the backrest of a chair at a nearly 90-degree angle. Given the awkward configuration, the patient evidently did his best, configuring his spine in an awkward backbend. Upon entering the room, Mackenzie was horrified till the patient explained that the pain had finally relented. Mackenzie realized that he had placed the patient's spine in extension, thus eliminating the disc herniation's pressure on the spinal nerve root. Spinal extension, he would learn, did not always end acute pain. Depending on how the protruding disc made contact with the spinal nerve root, forward bend that put the spine in flexion could be just the ticket. When the treatment was appropriately delivered, recovery from an acute episode could only take a few days. And once the patient knew what worked, he could rescue himself if he was in a crisis. But most physical therapists order the same cookie-cutter routine for most lower back pain patients, ensuring that most won't get better. Patients who fail physical therapy, especially several times in a row, use that as information as evidence that they need surgery. They don't recognize that the cookie-cutter physical therapy, what you get when you pay through insurance or on a lien basis, is just a pseudo-intervention. That PT basically serves as a hoarding tank for patients who are not quite ready to get on the gravy train of scans and tests and injections and surgery and pain management. You may often wonder why it's necessary to get a physician's prescription for PT, and that's not required for chiropractic. The answer lies in the hierarchical relationship between physicians and PTs. The latter have traditionally served as support staff rather than independent operators. At the end of the day, physician lobbying groups don't want PTs to gain direct access. Talk to a physician over a few beers, tell you that if you go to an excellent physical therapist to treat a musculoskeletal condition, you'll not need drugs or imaging, and you'll not need a surgeon. Therefore, physicians have a vested interest in keeping patients under their own care. Certified physical personal trainers get their degrees after a weekend online course. Some have abbreviated the CPT to just PT, standing for personal trainer. This suggests expertise and education they rarely possess. The 2015 review of the medical literature, the Agency for Healthcare Research, found no evidence that epidural steroid injections were effective in treating symptoms of spinal stenosis or typical lower back pain. Even in the presence of a recent disc herniation and ensuing sciatica, the benefits of injections are small. So the steroid injections basically useless. Okay, let's talk about the Alexander technique. This is something that works. The origins of the Alexander technique lie with F.M. Alexander, a Tasmanian actor and orator who, in the late 1800s, was trying to make a living by declaiming Shakespeare in stentorian tones. But his terrible stage fright, shortness of breath, and fear-induced laryngitis threatened to derail his career. So let's do some Alexander technique voice exercises. Let's start with the whispered R. So it begins with an exhale. Think of something funny, about this much space between your teeth. La 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 la. And silent la la las. Okay, now you hear a difference in the quality of my voice. In an effort to overcome these problems, F.M. Alexander recited his lines before a mirror. As he spoke, he saw that in preparation, he sucked in his breath as if before a long underwater swim, stiffened his neck, pulled his head back, and depressed his larynx. When he relaxed, allowing his neck to move naturally and his spine to lengthen, as if a string pulled the top of his head towards the sky, laryngitis, breathlessness, and anxiety disappeared. Alexander performed for another decade, but he also helped other actors and musicians leave behind the habitual motor patterns he called debauched kinesthesia. In 1904, prominent British surgeon who learned about Alexander's technique, helped finance the move to London. Each night before the curtain rose, Alexander was on call at West End theatres, helping actors warm up before they performed. A decade later, when he took the practice to Broadway, he attracted the attention of Columbia University professor James Harvey Robinson, who described his encounter with F.M. Alexander in the Atlantic Monthly. Robinson was a self-acknowledged slouch, and he hoped that Alexander could help him to do something about it. Those of us who are conspicuously slovenly in our carriage are urged by parents, teachers, and friends to brace up, he wrote in The Atlantic. I have given myself this order and received it from others since childhood, but found that my best efforts failed. Now I see the reason. No one explained to me that it was to brace up. I assumed that an effort to elevate my chest, buckle in my back, and bring my shoulder blades as neatly together as possible was the desired end. This is what most people do when they endeavor to straighten themselves. While there might be worse positions, this one tends to involve a great deal of strain, tends to throw out the abdomen, and does not really increase the freedom of the lungs. So to increase the freedom of the lungs, you want your spine to lengthen and your shoulders to release to the side. So increase your field of awareness so you simultaneously see both sides of the room as you get up and down. See both sides of the room, increase your field of awareness as you sit up and stand down. Think about your back lengthening up, your head releasing to lead your whole body into length. So the back of your head goes straight up. The top of your head, your forehead goes forward and up. Simultaneously see both sides of the room, so you're increasing your field of awareness. As you do that, your back will lengthen and widen. Your lungs will have more room to expand. So Robinson wrote of a bodily dogmatism which shows itself in a strong reluctance to grant that our habitual posture and movements are wrong. So that insistence on doing things the way you'd always done them had to be banished, Robinson realized while working with F.M. Alexander. Slumping was a habit, and it was one that could be broken, but it would not disappear in a vacuum. It was essential to provide the body with an alternative. So what's going on in the chat? Do I have back pain? Nope. So, hey, thank you, Richard. Love seeing you in the chat. And yeah, pain management is a scam of its own. So the best way to stop pain, move your body. Yep. But especially if you can do it with less muscular tension so that you can move with ease, expand the field of awareness. Think about the head releasing forward and up. Whew. That's good. Instead of slumping down into one thing, expand your field of awareness. You notice the infinite space all around you. Ooh, that feels good. Clinical trials of expensive drugs and devices are common, while investigations of protocols or products that won't make hundreds of millions of dollars are rare. Still, there are exceptions, and the Alexander technique, which has received considerable attention in peer-reviewed medical journals, is among them. 33 years after F.M. Alexander left Tasmania for the West End of London, a group of 19 doctors composed and signed a letter to the British Medical Journal endorsing his approach, noting that they had seen beneficial changes in use and function with the technique in their patients and themselves. They urged that such training be incorporated into medical school curricula to be taught by F.M. Alexander himself. Poor use of the body, they wrote, predisposed a patient to disorder and disease, including back pain, and they thought that the Alexander technique might be the antidote. From what I could see, that advice was ignored. But 71 years later, the British Medical Journal published the outcome of a large randomized controlled trial funded by the United Kingdom's Medical Research Council, which in turn funded by the government. University researchers recruited about 500 patients from 64 general medicine practices. Prior to starting the trial, the patients, all of whom had experienced at least 5 years of back pain, made lists of tasks that they could no longer perform. When the study ended, the plan was to evaluate whether anything had changed. One group of participants received normal care, that is, physiotherapy. Another got massage therapy, and the third group got 6 lessons in the Alexander technique, and a fourth group had 24 Alexander lessons in combination with a walking program. Those who were massaged were the first to experience relief, but when the massages ran out, so did the benefits. Physiotherapy patients and those who had 6 Alexander lessons saw less improvement than those who took 24 Alexander lessons and joined the walking program. Instead of inspiring admiration, the study upset both allopathic physicians who practice conventional Western medicine and holistic practitioners who feared that the British National Health Service would bail on standard conservative treatments for back pain, thus ruining their practices. Normally, after a paper appears in an eminent scientific journal, a few comments raised with great deference to the authors are published or posted online. But after the paper describing the Alexander technique study appeared in BMJ, generated 67 such comments within days, mostly from physicians. Few of them were even marginally polite. Just as UK physicians had attempted or feared, the NHS embraced the Alexander technique as part of its revised guidelines and declined to allow epidural steroid jabs, the most common low back pain conditions. From there, it got ugly. In July 2009, Paul Watson, at the time the head of the British Pain Society, who'd been involved in developing the new guidelines and put the kibosh on injections, was ousted from his leadership post in what members described as an extraordinary row. As the battle over the usefulness of the Alexander technique raged in the United Kingdom, I prepared for a session with Judith Stern, a teacher who'd been helpful to David Homan, who no longer had to seek relief from his back pain on his organization's conference room table. As I watched some lessons on YouTube, I was puzzled. The Alexander teacher followed a student around a small room, minutely adjusting the position of his head and neck. The change was so minor that it's hard to imagine how they could be effective. Judith Stern had taught the Alexander technique to clients for more than 25 years. 45-minute session cost $95. And she explained she would try to undo my unconscious habits and help me develop conscious control, which would permit my system to come back into balance. Most Alexander technique work occurs while the student is upright and walking, but in my initial session with Stern, I found myself on the table, her hands cradling my head while she gently shifted it by millimeters. If I could locate a position of ease while lying down, she explained, I'd be able to find it again while standing, sitting, and walking. Her work, she explained, was not so much about fixing bad habits as about inhibiting them so that innately good habits could take over. When you've been in chronic pain for years, she says you've spent a long time detaching yourself from your body's sensations out of self-preservation. It can take a while to tune into what your body is doing. Yes, the Sackler family does not approve because they can't sell any opioids. And I don't know about the device that hangs you upside down, but I've heard about them. My fellow Jews, good to see you. My fellow white people. Am I trying to say there's an anti-Alexander technique conspiracy? Yeah, physicians and chiropractors and people who make money off long-term repeated treatment for back pain, they're out of an income source. If someone takes Alexander technique and learns to move with ease and lets go of their back pain, and all those people who are prey on recurring back pain patients who get them in taking treatment for years and years, expensive treatment, they're out of an income source. So of course they resent and hate the Alexander technique. After about a quarter of an hour, Judith Stern asked if I could feel a difference between my right and left legs while lying on my back. My left leg is alive, I said. My right leg feels dead. That's a great kinesthetic distinction to make, she said. You are constantly holding and guarding your right hip. It's such an entrenched habit that you won't even let go when you are well supported and lying down. You do it when you walk and sit, but you do it also when you're sleeping. The tightness in those muscles, Stern observed, was the physiological equivalent of a knot tied in a garden hose. It impaired my circulation and sent other muscles into spasm, cutting down on my resilience and making me more vulnerable to new injury. So think about what you do when you come to sit down in a chair. You're simply walking over and thinking about sitting in a chair. You'll notice you have all these tendencies to compress and tighten and hold your breath before you even start actually sitting. Just the thought of sitting will make you collapse. So you have to make a conscious decision to expand your field of awareness when you're sitting down rather than collapse into the chair. So expand, up, down to the side. Expand your field of awareness. Expand your field of awareness. Expand your field of awareness. Let go of everything you think you know. So you can have a new experience where you can just sit here and trick yourself I'm not standing up, I'm not standing up, I'm not standing up, I'm not standing up. Boom. And you surprise yourself. Not standing up, I'm not standing up, I'm not standing up, I'm not standing up. Boom. You surprise yourself. Then you'll find that you move much more easily when you surprise yourself. She asked me to allow my torso to release away from my limbs, to let it widen and soften. My intellect said, huh, but my body was on board. I could feel the tension lessen in my hip as my shoulders and ribcage spread like a pudding across the table. Your brain is convinced that hanging on like this is the way to help you survive, the only way to keep you safe, she said, and that it'd be unwise to let go. My job is to serve as a guide to show you that it is safe to give up this hoarding. It is to show you how to do less and still be yourself. I want to introduce you to the 2-year-old Catherine, who knew perfectly well how to be at ease and upright and how to play. You don't need to be this wired to be effective. So we all tend to know ourselves by attention patterns. That's why it's so disconcerting to let go of our habitual attention patterns. And that's the Alexander technique, to slowly peel away all these accretions of bad habits of tension and compression that we've developed, so that we can go back to being our best selves, where we developed all these destructive habits of hunching and crunching and compressing and pulling down and tightening. Remember, all beliefs are just unnecessary muscular tension. So when you're free of beliefs, your breath will be the most easy, your back will be the most wide, the lungs will have the most room to expand. Yeah, when can we take the Alexander technique to Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park? Yeah, it's an alt-right upswing. So take the alt-right upswing, expand your field of awareness, let go of everything you think you know. Oh, that feels good. Although in real life I almost never cry, once again I dissolved into tears. Stern handed me a box of tissues, asking me what it might be like if I could ratchet down the intensity with which I did everything in my life. We don't know how much unnecessary work we're doing, she said, till someone shows us how to do something different. Storing a lot of fear and pain and anxiety in those muscles, and it is my job to give you a sense of what it's like to let your head and neck rest, take all those muscles off duty. So wherever you are right now, let go of all the tension in your forehead. Let go of all the tension around your eyes. Let go of all the tension around your lips. Allow your neck to be free. Think about the top of your head directing straight up in space. Think about your forehead releasing forward and up. Think about your shoulders being easy and free and releasing to the sides. Let's do some silent la la las. So as you let go of all this tension in your face, around your forehead, around your eyes, around your jaw, you'll notice at the same time you're letting go of the intensity with which you hold your beliefs. Because you can't hold your beliefs intensely and not have a significant increase in body tension. I would have been pleased to allow Judith Stern to whisper to my arms, legs, and torso for the rest of the day. But after half an hour, she asked me to let myself go as floppy as a marionette while she guided me into a seated position. Dangle from my hand, she said. Now don't worry about your spine. I'll hold it for now. Let's take a little walk like you're a dangling skeleton with your head and neck free and the pelvis hanging down. Following her instructions, I could sense that I'd made peace with the forces of gravity, at least briefly. That looks good on you, Stern observed. Finding my balance would take time, she added. If, as you have been, someone who's been dramatically separated from her body to survive, tends to be a longer journey. Back on the sidewalk, a chilly wind blowing straight off the Hudson hit me, and instead of hunching my shoulders against it or screwing up my face in useless icy misery, thought about allowing my head to move forward and up, releasing my legs from my torso, and made my way toward the subway for the moment, feeling very free. So yeah, that's a little chapter on Alexander technique in this excellent 2016 book, Crooked, Outwitting the Back Pain Industry and Getting on the Road to Recovery. Doing live streams on the JQ every day can't be good for your back. So I'm trying to think, what's that? Who's the guy who wrote the most famous book on back pain? I'll have to go on Amazon.com. He kind of gave like the psychological approach to back pain. He's famous. He's like a 5'2" doctor. Oh, come on. Come on. Let's just go. Okay, I can't find it there. Back pain. He's like the most famous guy. He just has you do like write in your journal, and John Sano. Okay, there's amazing stuff in this book on John Sano. Long before scientists had access to the imaging technology that allowed them to visualize neuronal activity, physiatrist John Sano grasped the relationship between chronic pain and emotional distress. Every time I told anyone I was writing about back pain, I learned to expect questions about whether I knew John Sano's work, S-A-R-N-O. Almost everyone had run into someone who'd been cured by Sano, often after years of discomfort. I was happy to be able to inform his many admirers that, yes, I'd actually spoken with the rock star of the back world. By the time we talked on the phone, Sano was well up in years and perhaps less guarded about expressing his feelings than he would have been in his younger days. So after medical school at Columbia University, John Sano worked for a decade as a family practitioner. And eventually he got into specializing with back pain. And John Sano saw the wisdom in exercise, but he recognized that workouts 3 times a week were not in the cards for most of his patients. Nor was Sano convinced that exercise would resolve their back problems, which he viewed as manifestations of emotional turmoil. Although Sano was neither psychoanalytically trained nor well acquainted with the works of Sigmund Freud, he attributed the pent-up rage to an unruly subconscious process rather than a physiological one. If he could convince a patient that his subconscious was kicking up a fuss to distract him from personal issues, and that this fuss was manifested in reduced blood flow to the postural muscles, the patient would relinquish the notion that something was structurally wrong and shortly return to a functional life. He called the condition tension myositis syndrome, or TMS. Sano found that the patients who had the most success with his approach were hardworking perfectionists, driven by self-imposed pressure that left them feeling stretched to the breaking point. Often they'd had a chaotic childhood and they'd struggled to gain control over unpredictable and toxic environments. Though the specifics would not come to light for a couple of decades, in time, research would show that people, especially women, who experienced significant physical and psychological adversity in childhood were at greater risk for chronic pain than those whose early days were less challenging. So John Sano's first hit book was Healing Back Pain, The Mind-Body Connection. It came out in 1991, eventually sold over 1 million copies, and he became a household name. 1998, when he published The Mind-Body Prescription, Healing the Body, Healing the Pain, 2020 co-anchor John Stossel was in the midst of his own struggle. After Stossel sat down with Sano for a chat, he realized that his back felt better for the first time in months. As he planned a TV special on Sano, Stossel requested permission to call 20 of his patients, randomly chosen from the doctor's medical charts. The patients that Stossel's team interviewed all reported being better or much better. Roughly 15 million people watched that segment, and John Sano became America's back doctor. But there was a problem. Sano was unmistakably bad for business. He did not endear himself to the medical community when he announced that physicians were chiefly responsible for the pain epidemic that now exists in this country. Once patients became Sanoites, they lost their appetite for serial interventions. They canceled long-scheduled surgical procedures, usually at the 11th hour, citing a new perception that their problems were emotional rather than orthopedic. They stopped getting MRIs and spinal injections. They didn't show up for physical therapy appointments. At the peak of his popularity, John Sano charged up to $1,500 for in-person consultations. But each week, set aside several days when he spoke gratis, no charge, to prospective or current patients, regardless of whether they were celebrities, housewives, or truck drivers. He exorcised author and business pundit Tony Schwartz's spinal demons in 48 hours. In our phone interview, Schwartz outlined why he thought Sano's approach was so successful. He takes the fear out of the equation, the fear of, uh-oh, something must be really wrong with me. And the impact on back pain symptoms is dramatic. Wow, Howard Stern thinks that Dr. Sano's techniques fix homosexuality. That's fascinating. Yeah, when we train the alt-right militia, this is what we will use. Wow, Stephen James, I'm sorry to hear about your mother's lumbar scoliosis. Check out Alexander Technique. Check out John Sano's work. Yeah, back surgery should be the last thing you do. Most of Sano's patients never actually saw him. Ren Kaminsky, a retired New Jersey police officer, struggled with back pain and sciatica for 30 years. In the middle of a 6-month episode of recurrent sciatica, he limped down the hallway of a local elementary school. The school principal handed him his own dog-eared copy of Healing Back Pain. I took it home, Kaminsky said. I was in too much pain to read it, so I tossed it on the coffee table where it gathered dust for a couple of months. When he finally mustered the energy, he read the book straight through several times. Suddenly, I realized that my problem was that my mind was messing with me. 2 weeks later, he was better. I haven't had serious pain since. And for years, Ken Malloy was hired to develop patient training videos for New York University's medical facilities. He videotaped John Sano's lectures. And whenever he mentioned Sano to doctor, nurses, or administrators, they would roll their eyes. So this guy was some wacko. One of our conversations, I asked Sano, 88 years old, what he thought about back pain specialists were doing wrong. He says they're thinking like mechanics. They want to find out what's wrong with the machine and fix it. They treat the symptoms. They should know better. Symptomatic treatment is not good medicine. What's going on right now is a disgrace. It bugged him to no end that his colleagues ignored him or made fun of him. By his count, he treated conservatively 10,000 patients, which was nothing to sneeze at. He'd published volumes that decades later still topped Amazon's list of back pain books. But he was never asked to speak at professional meetings or invited, as most eminent specialists are, to lecture to professional groups about tension myositis syndrome or to deliver hospital grand rounds. Of the medical profession, he told me 99.999% will not accept this diagnosis of TMS. I don't get flack, I just get ignored. I've always wanted the approval of my peers and I haven't got it. John Sano's yearning for acceptance got to me. Felt like calling all those I knew in the back pain industry and insisting that, finally, before it's too late, they acknowledge his contribution. It sounded deeply tired. I suspected this would be our final conversation. I had one last question to ask. Did you recognize that the insights he developed in the 1980s were now making waves in the most elite academic circles? No, he said, I was not aware. I could send him medical journal articles to prove it, I said. I don't read the journals, he said. I don't care about the fancy machines. I just see the patients getting better, and that's all that matters. A year and a half later, America's back doctor did have his day in the sun. The invitation of Senator Tom Harkin of Iowa, he testified at a hearing of the U.S. Senate Committee on Health on Pain in America, exploring challenges to relief. The 90-year-old Sano, 5'2", delivered his message with great clarity. The bias that common pain must be the result of structural abnormalities of the spine or chemically or mechanically induced deficiency of muscle, coupled with the belief that emotions do not induce physiological change, has contributed to the exponential increase in the incidence of those now common pain disorders. The frequent diagnosis of such pain disorders was an iatrogenic disaster, one for which society is paying dearly. With just the power of the persuasion, John Sano convinced tens of thousands of people to reject symptoms that had incapacitated them for months or even years. With words alone, he helped people relinquish the belief that their functional lives had ended prematurely. For one man working out of a tiny office, he'd been remarkably influential, providing a cheap and fast way to go forward. He took the fear out of the equation. John Sano's conviction that the mind and the body were inextricably connected was definitely not fashionable in his heyday, but today, the best chronic pain rehabilitation programs focus on dealing with psychological roadblocks. Sent into hiding for many years, the enemy in chronic back pain has once again been identified. It is not a herniated disc or a gnarly facet joint, but fear-avoidant behavior, pain catastrophizing, and guarding. Have I ever tried kratom? No, don't even know what that is. I don't know anything about the reverse hyper machine. Yep, John Sano is the real deal. And so is this book, Crooked, Outwitting the Back Pain Industry and Getting on the Road to Recovery. So all the techniques that make the most money for doctors, physical therapists, and chiropractors do you the least good, while the things that do you the most good don't really earn much money for anyone. So check out John Sano. Check out this book, Crooked, Outwitting the Back Pain Industry. And if you're interested, check out the Alexander Technique. My Alexander website's alexander90210.com. Bye-bye.